Welcome, Shift Network, to another Me Too Dialogue. Right now, it is my privilege and honor to speak with Diva Carla Sanders. Diva Carla guides women who are fed up and not going to take it anymore on their journey to sexual wisdom, so they can own their pleasure, claim their powers of sex, wealth, and voice as normal, natural, expected, and required. She's the founder of the Cosmic Crone and Womb Wisdom Initiation, and you can learn more about her work at www.orgasmicalchemy.com. She also makes art and writes in the woods by a beaver pond in coastal Maine. Welcome, Carla.
Thank you. That's beautiful. It's wonderful to be here, Tanya.
So I had the privilege of having a goddess astrological reading with you, and it was right on for me. And so I kind of want to have a dialogue with you around our charts and our stars and what we bring in and what's in our charts about it. Since we last talked, I did a little reading about this god Nessus. Mm-hmm. So let's talk about astrology and what sexual wounding, what is the connection between sexual wounding in our astrological charts?
Okay, great. Oh, we have a planet out there. He's called a centaur. There's a class of planets called centaurs, and there is one called Nessus, who stands for sexual wounding, inappropriate sexual touch, sexual abuse, sexual repression, anything that cuts us off from what is normal and natural and sacred about our sexuality. There is actually a planet that shows up in our charts around that topic. And what he tells us, he can tell us things about, give us insight into the nature of the wound that we're facing, and he also shows us the path towards healing. So it might be helpful to understand where he came from. Why do we have such a planet in the astrology chart? This class of planets called centaurs, they were named that by astronomers, the scientists, and many people have heard of Chiron. He's known as the wounded healer. He is a centaur. That means he's a mythical being, half man, half horse. And there are many centaurs, and one of them is Nessus. The story of Nessus is that he was a ferryman across a river, and the Greek hero Heracles, or also known as Hercules, had to cross that river, and he was strong enough to walk across, but he had his wife with him, and he gave her to Nessus to ferry across on the boat. Well, Nessus extracted his payment. Stories say he either seduced her inappropriately or he raped her. Either way, he took her sexually. And then he manipulated her after this to cause the death of Hercules. And there are lots more pieces to the story, but that gives you the main idea. And so we look at Nessus and we see manipulation. We see the systemic disempowerment of the feminine. And we see the feminine body as the reward, as the spoils, if you will, the price exacted. So all of these things show up. And where Nessus shows up in your chart can give you insight into where you may be facing those issues in your own personal life and history, or in your family lineage. So does that give you an idea to start with?
I think that's going to let people everybody's going to be running to the Google to find out more about Nessus. So before we get into the specific places where Nessus can show up in the chart, you said Nessus is now in a transit that's been going on for a while and may continue to possibly 2032. What is this transit that Nessus is in right now, or has been in for some time?
Right now, Nessus is in the astrological sign Pisces. And he stays in this part of the sky, the Pisces area, for, I don't know, 30-ish years. I did not look up those details because, Tanya, I looked up something even more interesting.
Okay.
I looked up the natal chart of the United States of America.
Oh.
If you go to that chart using the time 1776, July 4th, 1776 in Philadelphia, the signing of the Declaration of Independence, you get the birth chart of the United States. And Nessus, the United States is having a Nessus return right now.
Wow.
Nessus in 1776 was at 9 degrees Pisces. And right now, as you and I are talking, Nessus is at 9 degrees Pisces. This would be the second Nessus return of the United States. So go ahead.
When would the first one have been?
It would have been around 1896, just before the turn of the century.
And what is the significance of Nessus in the ninth?
Nessus on the 9th degree of Pisces. Well, what's significant, I didn't look up the chart for houses and stuff like that. I didn't do a full reading. I just think it's significant because here we are continuing a dialogue that began last year with women coming forward, basically saying we are fed up and we are not going to take it anymore. We are going to find the courage and strength of our stories. And then people like you, gathering people who have the full range of this story. And the United States, which to its discredit, has made a system of suppression of sexuality, information about sexuality, women, children. We are used, our bodies, the bodies of women, children, and people of color are the spoils. This is a country built on abuse.
Written into the Constitution. So we've got a second return of Nessus. Is there something different about this return of Nessus that gives us the hope that we can shift it now? We don't have to do another couple hundred years of that.
Nessus always carries that hope because Nessus gives you information about the wound and it shows the way home and the way through. So the fact that Nessus is transiting says, first of all, there will be backlash. We will suddenly find ourselves fighting harder. And it's time. Time's up. Nessus means time's up. Melanie Reinhardt is an astrologer who is my go-to resource on Nessus. And she calls it, Nessus shows up, the buck stops here. Whatever you brought into this life that is Nessus material, victimhood, abuse, maybe it happened back in your lineage or a past life, or it happened in your infancy or childhood, whatever you bring in, you have the power to deal with it, extract the blessings, the gifts, and the medicine, and turn it into transformation. In other words, we can stop this lineage of abuse and suppression and repression right now. And so that's what you see. I did look to see where the resources are. What else is going on in that US chart? Today, as we speak, the sun is transiting the Venus of that USA natal chart. So the goddess, the brightest of our goddesses, is saying, I'm here for you. I am your courage. Also, Hecate and the North Node are conjunct right now in Leo, and they are passing over the North Node of the United States. So right now we have a moment that is calling the United States to a destiny of stopping the abuse, of changing the system and the culture. So that's how it can be different. We are how it can be different.
Yes, we are. That's the only thing that's going to change anything on our planet. Nessus in everybody's chart.
Yes.
Okay.
Everybody has Nessus somewhere. What do you want to know, dear?
Well, I mean, I know we didn't plan for this for you to do a chart on everybody, but let's say where might Nessus show up in someone who is a victim of sexual abuse versus someone who was a perpetrator, and maybe perpetrators and victims are the same people?
Often, yes. If there is a perpetrator, you go back in time and you find that pattern of perpetrator victim throughout history. So I can speak for the charts that I've done in general. And the women who come to work with me they're bringing a sexual issue, and it may be related to sexual abuse, but it's certainly related to sexual unhappiness and dissatisfaction. That's usually the number one thing that brings them my way. So when that's how I got into astrology. I started looking at their charts to see what helpful information I could find. And 9 times out of 10, there was a significant Nessus aspect. And I can speak to the ones who have terrible stories of abuse and incest. And a lot of times their Nessus is aspected on, that means it's placed around their nodal axis. That means that South Node, North Node. The South Node is the stuff you bring in, your baggage. The North Node is your destiny, and it's what you're creating in this life. So I see that a lot. I don't see it all the time. You see, it can show up. There are infinite ways that astrology charts can be formulated upon your birth. But I do see the very worst cases. I have seen South Node and Nessus, or a Sun Nessus or Nessus rising. That means that Nessus material is really tied up with your identity. And so you kind of came here to have that journey. Some people don't like it when people talk that way, but you have to make sense of this somehow. This pain somehow has to make sense. And the beauty of it, go ahead, ask your question.
No, go ahead.
Well, the beauty of it, the power of it is that Nessus, the women who come to me, and I can't speak for everybody that, the people you've talked to, but the women who come to me are on a healing journey. They are actively reclaiming their power. They may have done therapy around whatever it is, and they're ready for a next step. I am a next step, not a first step. People need to deal with a therapist and around abuse issues before they're ready to reclaim power and look at a more fulfilling sex life. So someone like me, who has a spiritual approach to it all, is someone who can help them with that next step. So I'm looking at women on their power journey. They've already done some work. And so they're saying, the buck stops here. I am ready to change this forever right now. I'm not passing this on to my children.
I guess a bunch of questions came up in my head. I don't even know if you remember, but I know Nessus was very near my North Node, I think, or something.
No, you actually did not have a strong Nessus. The only Nessus aspects you had were conjunctions to Hecate and the Lilith star. So the divine feminine, demonized feminine Lilith, and Hecate, the crone. And I saw them in your case as protective resources that helped you work through any Nessus energy that you might have come in with, or that happened to you. Mm-hmm. So your North Node was also very powerful and was a resource for you in dealing with that.
So you just assume people have some sexual thing going on when they come to you? Because what if they didn't and you saw this Nessus aspect? Would you bring it up if they didn't bring up any issue? I'm just asking you how you do your practice.
When I'm doing a chart for someone I don't know, I work with clients, and so I get a detailed history. And yet people who come to me exclusively for readings, and some of them do, I don't hand that to them and say, oh, find out where your sex abuse is. Mm-hmm. I will refer to Nessus. I will explain what it means. It can have other meanings besides that kind of abuse. But I do know we all have it in our history. So I just say, this is what it means. This is the story it's telling in your chart. I don't ask them to unburden themselves about that. That's a special relationship. And so, and nor do I say, oh, you may have forgotten about this. You may have repressed this information, and now we're going to wake it up. Mm-hmm. If someone does say, yeah, I had a lot of abuse in my life. I had a rape. I had my father, my uncle, the boy next door, whatever it was, I will check in with them about what they need and have they had support. And, I don't leave people cold if that information comes up. I do my best for them and send them to resources.
Wonderful. I've never had a chart where anybody talked about the goddesses and the centaurs in my chart. So that in and of itself is a new thing for me. I just never had that done. So educate me, and for anybody else out there like me, about the places where Nessus could show up and what story that might carry.
I look for Nessus. Well, I just look. I say, where's Nessus? Oh, Nessus isn't doing very much. So we might set that aside. Or I say, wow, Nessus I look for conjunctions or aspects. It could be a square, a trine, or a conjunction, or an opposition. I look for sun, the rising point. I look for things like the midheaven. The midheaven is the cusp of the 10th house, your house of career. Mm-hmm. I get people with 10th house Nessus whose work is to work for justice around these issues. And it could be because of their own history that they work for justice, or they could be coming from another direction. Mm-hmm. So I look for where it's showing up. I look for it. It can be anywhere, but the sexuality houses like 5th house, 7th house, 8th house, relationship houses, 7th and 8th house. Nessus can be very interesting in the 12th house, which is the place of the unconscious. It's what we don't know that we know, or what we don't know that we don't know. I always look for where are the allies and support systems. That's one reason I do a divine feminine astrology reading. I find that the goddess points which are usually minor planets and not always looked at by astrologers, I find that they are full of resources, especially for women. Strength and spiritual truth and power and ferocity and nourishment and gentleness.
What are some of these planets that are the resources, you know, if we have an odd aspected Nessus?
My very favorites to look at are Lilith. Lilith, the first wife of Adam, the first woman, according to the Garden of Eden story that many of us know. And she stands for unassailable integrity. Rather than submit to Adam, she supposedly left Eden. I have some other ideas about that, that's the story the men told, that actually she never left. She was always there. She would not leave her home, but she was demonized. And so a resource I encourage people to look at, M. Kelly Hunter has done a lot of work around the Liliths, and I look at 3 Liliths usually, and sometimes there are some more sneaking around, but these 3 usually tell the story. Lilith star is the demonized feminine. When patriarchy said the goddess is the demon and evil, she is the star Algol on astrology charts. Then there is Black Moon Lilith, which is related. She's actually a mathematical point. There's not even a body there. That's why Kelly Hunter refers to her as this vortex of divine feminine energy coming into form, because she doesn't really exist, and yet she is very strong and potent energetically, because I won't try to explain it because it'll get too crazy, but she's related to the orbit of the moon around the earth. So that's Black Moon Lilith, and she is a dark goddess. All Liliths are dark goddesses. And then there's a Lilith asteroid. And the Lilith asteroid is the more personal, disowned feminine within us. She's the part of ourselves that has been repressed and told it's not good enough. You're too emotional, you're too much, you're too hard to get along with, you're too sexy, you're not sexy enough, you're too fat, you're too everything. You're not good enough because you are female. So those are the 3 main Liliths. And when I see Nessus with those, there's usually a story there. And it can be any kind of aspect. It can be an aspect that says, I came into this life to kick Nessus's ass. Or it can be, I've had to go through some pretty horrible stuff. And I am ready to heal from that. And I don't want anyone else to experience this. So those are some really powerful. Venus is a powerful series, the nourisher. In your case, Hecate, the crone. I don't know what your story is about that, but Hecate was saying, I am stronger than Nessus. I've got this, and I've got you. That's what I believe.
Awesome. So do you think there's a way, because usually people who are on a path of healing from whatever is going on in their life, we tend to be seekers, and we tend to seek answers from all sources. We tend to be people who, I imagine that the people who want to come and listen to these conversations are people who are looking for some answers, some help, some insight, some other way of seeing things than they've already seen. Is there a way that you think that that we can work with our astrological chart to source our healing and following our path to I have a thing I say when people on their birthday, it's a Cherokee birth blessing. May you live long enough to know why you were born.
Oh, yeah.
what is the way in which our astrology can assist us in that path?
Our astrology is all about living so that you know why you were born. The astrology chart, people who don't know this at all, at the moment you're born, if you have an exact birth time and place, you can get a chart for what was happening in the heavens at that moment. And that chart is aspirational. It tells you things that you came in with. It can point to areas of challenge, which actually only make you stronger. And it points to where you are going. Often I do a lot of work with women in midlife, and a lot of times the 10th house, that house of career and reputation and work in the world, doesn't make sense until you're in your 40s or 50s. What happened with Nessus or Pluto doesn't make sense until you've got some time. And so the astrological chart, it can show you where it hurts, but it also shows you where you have resources and where you can heal. It is totally not about, this is going to be the worst day of your life. You're going to have a really crappy year. Just, stay indoors, don't go out. Astrology is not that. It is about who you came to Earth to be as an empowered, divine human being with baggage and tools and gifts and all the things you have to go through to know what those are. And that's why I use it.
Well, I think that's a wonderful way to wrap up this dialogue with Diva Carla. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your gifts and your wisdom with us for the Shift Network.
Thank you for inviting me.